So that's all of the information we got from these three phases. Press releases from the filming phase and from the casting phase before that. Next section now. What do we make of this? What can we analyze? What do we think they're doing using critical thinking and not wish lists? What you have to consider isn't just what HBO has been saying, but what they haven't been saying. What aren't they showing us here? What really annoys me are all of the hype fans and celebrity TV news sites that got really worked up about Season 8. You know, the ones that projected all their hopes and entertaining fan theories onto it, not considering if it was based on any evidence from reports. I draw a direct parallel between the mindless hype for Season 8 in the lead up to it and the baseless hype for the Long Night prequel. Consider the time period that the Long Night prequel was announced in. Last summer, June 2018. Hype for Season 8 was at its peak. It was still going strong, and would remain so until the premiere this past spring. And with no other news, we just exhausted our theorization on this after 3 months and still had another 6 months to go. So by Christmas 2018, everyone's fan theories about the Long Night prequel had pretty much solidified. Around, not even predictions, they didn't say, oh, this is a prediction. They were wish lists that grew into assumptions. And that's the same thing that happened to Season 8. How many people were going, not just I theorize that, well, I don't know, Bran Stark time traveled to be the Night King, or the Night King's going to burn King's Landing, or some other thing that just never came up, that they didn't just hope for, but were surprised when it didn't happen because they treated it as an assumption, honeypotting, as we call it. Back from when they would do stupid writing things for Talissa in Season 2, and people went, oh, they'll explain this by saying she's a honeypot spy, and then she really wasn't. So, all of these wish lists and assumptions for the Long Night prequel are just like how all of those news sites and fan sites and the hype fans for Season 8, you know who I'm talking about, Entertainment Weekly, they were just drawing up wish lists for what Season 8 should be, and look where that got them. So my point is this: a lot of the shallow news sites, hype reporters, message boards everywhere, social media, they not only assume, but wholeheartedly believe, even as late as post-Season 8 convention panels and videos I'm seeing, they believe there's going to be a sprawling intercontinental narrative in the Long Night prequel, just like Game of Thrones, when Daenerys and other characters travel to other continents. Based purely on one line about mysteries of the East and a few stray mentions of how the Long Night affected other continents beyond Westeros. And they sort of spun this into an elaborate fan theory, now assumption, that has gone viral. Just like earlier fan theories about Season 8, which takes it as a given that the Golden Empire of Yi will feature prominently in it, which is their fantasy version of China. Specifically, the legendary First Dynasty of Yi, the Empire of the Dawn, which does have a story about the Long Night in it, but you're grasping at straws to say, how is this interconnected with the building of the wall? I'm slowing down for emphasis. This is what I'm building up to. I put forward to you a simple question. If everyone is so sure that Yi not just should, but absolutely will appear in the Long Night prequel prominently, why hasn't a single Asian actor been cast for it? Nor have any casting sheets for wider crowds of, spear carriers, of guardsmen. No casting sheets have asked for a single Asian actor. That it's fantasy China. And a lot of people just look at the sound bites of the actors who have been cast, the big wave of 8 in January, or then the 6 in March. Hey, Miranda Richardson is in this, Josh Whitehouse is in this. and they just assume, they don't bother to check. Oh, I guess the others will be coming later. Now is later. If they were going to appear, they would have been cast, or we would have seen a casting sheet. But a good measure of what physical locations will see is when you scrutinize casting sheets, not just for this, I mean, in prior seasons. When you looked at a casting sheet, when you look at the minor roles of extras in crowd scenes, you can kind of get a sense of this might not be in Westeros when they're casting non-white people. Like, if you got, for Season 6 of Game of Thrones, a casting sheet for half a dozen female cast members described only as handmaiden, but these handmaidens' race is described as sort of Middle Eastern or Turkish looking, then there's a good chance that you would see the Dothraki Sea again in Season 6, right? Stands to reason. Well, look at the pattern of casting calls combined with announced actors for the Long Night prequel. Yes, they announced many black actors, as in specifically African black, and many blindly jumped on this to praise the show for its diversity based on nothing. They have a diverse cast, apparently, but are these well-written characters? Do they have a single frame, a single description to go on? And not only were they saying it's diverse because of these black actors, I saw like news sites and fan channels assuming there's a lot of black people, therefore it's a diversity show, and there will also be a lot of Latino, Middle Eastern, and Asian people. We haven't seen a single one of those cast, with the one exception of a mixed race character, and we've seen none in casting sheets. So, but the black characters, that's totally unrelated to whether or not we'll see Fantasy China, Yi Ti. As I said, they did put out a casting call for a mixed race character, but never Latino or Middle Eastern, other terms they've used in the past for this kind of thing. Mediterranean, mixed race. And that can mean a couple of things, but given that they haven't described other groups at all, based on no insider information, just a pure guess, I'm leaning towards, based on the evidence, that Marquis Rodriguez is playing A, and that A, the mixed-race teenager, is a biracial child of a black person and a white person, from these two other groups they've described. I could be wrong. He could be a Roinar who is off on his own as this foreigner in a foreign land, but it is increasingly unlikely, based on they're not casting crowds of these other people. At the very least, we wouldn't physically see the Roinar city-states in Essos. We wouldn't physically see Yi Ti. And even though we weren't seeing large crowds of extras being cast with like East Asian people for Yi Ti, I kind of held out hope that we'd see a Melisandre-like character from the East visiting Westeros, but we still haven't heard a single piece of news about that. It now seems that it's not happening. But so many other people it's the lack of critical thinking on this, and it's what they want to be true. They believe it because they need to. They just went down wish lists of what technically exists in the Long Night time period, rather than what could plausibly interweave with a narrative about the Starks and the Wall in Westeros. So if you actually sit down and look at all of these wish list descriptions, assumptions that major news outlets have, that we'll definitely see Yi Ti, that we'll definitely see the Giscari Empire in Slaver's Bay, which is kind of like ancient Egypt, or that we'll see the Roinar, ancestors of the Dornishmen who kind of look Latino, Mediterranean, they're where the free cities are now. There's not a shred of evidence indicating any of that any of these groups will appear at all, much less that they'll appear on screen. Yi Ti probably isn't in it because not a single Asian person has been cast. And now, in the filming phase, simple question. Have you seen a leaked photo of a single set that looked like Fantasy China? No. And for all I know, it's like an interior set that they're hiding in the Titanic studios. We can only see the external sets and costumes of actors walking between buildings. Maybe it's all green screen. Like, that's how Bravos was done in Season 4. That they didn't build external parts of the city yet. That happened for Season 5. It was really just one room in the Iron Bank, and it didn't need a crowd shot because it was just 3 people. So maybe we'll be seeing it a little, but at the very least, it's not going to be a major location. Would you describe Bravo Season 4, a one-scene event, as a major location? And if nothing else, I think we can confidently say they're not core cast members. That if we were going to have a character on the scale of Cersei, Arya, Tyrion, Jaime, Jon Snow, the core 5 to 7 POV narrators that dominated events that were the core cast members on Game of Thrones, we're not going to get an Asian man on the scale of a Jaime Lannister. They would have cast him already by now. That I'm pretty sure that people they announced are the core cast like that. So at best, they'd be a secondary character who shows up in a later season. We don't even know if they'll show up in a later season. We have no reason to assume they would. And just after they cast a few black people and put out casting calls for black people, and only black people, not Dornishmen, not Asian people. And there were all these assumptions people jumped to. We don't know who they're playing. So it's not just what they're saying, it's what they're not saying. And now, in the filming stage, did we see anything that looked like the Rhoynar city-states or Yi Ti? Did we see anyone dressed like a Summer Islander or a Summer Islander boat or a set that looks like the Summer Islanders? Did we see something that looked like Fantasy China? We saw nothing. We saw something that looks kind of, based on their clothing, like ancient Bronze Age Greece, but all the people wearing them, they're played by white people, except for one character, Georgina Campbell, who we never heard of her casting before, who is black, and I'm not sure how that fits in. But what aren't they telling us is just as important. So to wrap up here, the summary list in one page, there are really only 7 is a good number, 7 things we learned. 1, the Starks and White Walkers are in it, as you would expect for a Long Night prequel, and there's probably more direwolves and mammoths in it. 2, there's a lot of filming in cave sets. 3, Casterly Rock and Land the Clever are in it in some capacity, so the cave sets might either be for Children of the Forest or Casterly Rock, possibly both. 4, spy photos of Naomi Watts in full costume, and extras are dressed sort of like Bronze Age Greece more than Bronze Age Britain, but they're all played by white people, so I don't think these are Rhoynar. And point 5, we saw a lot of rusted iron suits, even though it says the Bronze Age for them. Now, point 6, the only non-white people they're casting are consistently described as black. That's the term they use, not Middle Eastern and not Asian, which leads me to point 7. Based on the people they haven't been casting, their physical description, that they haven't cast anyone or put out casting calls for anyone who's Asian or Mediterranean or Middle Eastern, Yi Ti, the Giscari, and the Rhoynar probably do not appear in this TV series. Certainly not as core cast members from Season 1. So these are the 7 points we can say. Now, time is running out because Martin just announced that Jane Goldman will show him a rough cut edit of the pilot in early September. That obviously the special effects will need to be added. When you have a rough cut, they go, well, here, that's the green screen where a dragon will be added later, but we edited together all the human parts, the special effects going later. That's what a rough cut looks like. I'm not surprised by that. He will be seeing a rough cut of what this looks like in early September, and I'm terrified that HBO is going to do what they did last time when the pilot for Game of Thrones failed, and Benioff just tricked them with the sunk cost fallacy that, yeah, you blew $10 million on this pilot, and if you want to, it's terrible, and if you want to see a return on your investment, you'll continue to, because they couldn't fire him, he held the rights to it. If you want to see a return on that money, you will greenlight Season 1. Why do bad movies get released anyway, or TV shows, to make back at least a fraction of the money that went into producing them? That the next few weeks are a critical time in which the new heads of HBO, because the men who approved the Long Night prequel, Richard Plepler, doesn't work for HBO anymore. He's the one who greenlit this. The new head put in charge by AT&T, Bob Greenblatt, has he even seen a thorough description of what they're doing in the Long Night prequel? So in September, they're going to be showing around to people who might not have seen or been aware of what they're doing. George R. R. Martin, Bob Greenblatt, this is what the Long Night prequel is like. And there'll be a critical point where they'll be going, should we go through with this just to make back the money on it? Or if it's really bad, would it hurt our reputation even more at this critical time when Season 8 was not well received to release this? And there is hope. Bob Greenblatt has said openly, if I don't like the Long Night prequel pilot, I'm not going to approve it. That we want something to build as a tentpole of this network, and as opposed to Casey Bloys, the head of the drama department put there by Plepler, who's going, oh no, there are no other prequels, it's just a Long Night. Greenblatt has been openly saying, I might go with another idea if I don't like this. So because of that, I had hoped that more things, right back when this started, at the start of this playlist, when I started saying, in principle, why is a Long Night prequel a bad idea, just that it's a difficult setting to use, I said that last July I had heard leaks from reliable sources who were right about other things, which were totally shocking and convinced me this would be a disaster that you couldn't have predicted. And I didn't release it because A, I couldn't prove it, and B, I hoped something would leak out during the filming phase. And given just what we saw and what we didn't, in my next video, I am going to, in broad, vague terms, in the broadest of terms, say what's wrong with it. Not as specifically as I do know, because you wouldn't believe me, I can't prove it, and it might damage my source. Mostly because if I actually told you specifics, you wouldn't believe me. I'll tell you what to look for. That these are the things you should be looking for if we see another leak, so you'll know this is accurate, I told you. So because we're running out of time and the pilot will be out next month, and they'll try to put a positive spin on it of, well, once we made the pilot, what choice did we have but to approve it for a full season? Well, then you shouldn't have done a Long Night prequel. Or they'll pull sunk cost fallacy that, yes, the money that went into this was wasted. And the only use it can have now is for Bob Greenblatt to solidify his position as, I'm the new head of HBO, Warner Media. No, my predecessor's idea was terrible, and it'll help rebuild their reputation. Right now it's at a low. That no one trusts HBO after Season 8, even though the new head of HBO was not responsible for it. Bob Greenblatt, he took over from Plepler back in March. So there is hope for this, and just say the previous administration's failures are not yours, and you can immediately announce to the world, Mr. Greenblatt, this is a new day at HBO, we're going to be making smart shows now, and not making something as stupid as the Long Night prequel once you hear what's wrong with it. So, I need your help in the next video spreading this as much as possible. And hopefully we can show them the power of the internet and the power of fandom.